So welcome to everyone to this midwinter gardening discussion. I'm Dorgan Keeney. I'm assistant librarian here at Johnson Public Library, and I'm the organizer of these monthly discussions and the host today. The meeting will be recorded and made available on Green Mountain Public Access, Public TV Access. It's my pleasure to present Tony Lehouillier, owner and operator with his wife Joie of Foote, Brook Organic Farm here in Johnson. I hope you brought all your questions today. So please write your questions in the chat room or use the hand raising mechanism. Both Jean, the head librarian, and I are here at the library, so you can call us if you're having trouble at 635-7141. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony and Joie.
So we want to start off just talking about what we do over here?
Why don't you start, honey?
So most of you already know, but Foote Brook Organic Farm grows about 140 different varieties of vegetables. We grow on about 40 acres. That's like what's in, in production. We have the farm stand, we have a CSA, we sell to Whole Foods through Deep Root Organic Co-op. We also have Hunger Mountain and Buffalo Mountain now too. And what am I forgetting? Farmers to You out of Boston. So lots going on over here. But, and Tony, tell them how long you've been doing this for without telling them how old you are.
We started in 1995, and we were just doing restaurant sales. And in 1996, I contacted the Deep Root folks, so we started to scale up from there. And we've changed our scheme, our crop scheme, I guess, many times at this point. And we're doing a certain number of wholesale crops, but wholesale is a pretty tough game because you've really got to be efficient. So we basically, as far as wholesale goes, we're running like with kale for greens and as midsummer crops, and root vegetables in the winter.
How many greenhouses do we have?
We have 7 greenhouses. We also have a few ever-bearing raspberries in the greenhouses for the farm stand. And yeah, we try to do a season extension on both ends so that we can get as many crops out to the local people. And that is what we use the greenhouses for 99% for, is just for the local sales at the farm stand. We do start all our plants early for wholesale in one of the greenhouses, and eventually that greenhouse doesn't get used until we start drying crops like onions. So
then let's just jump in to make sure we get everybody's questions answered. There were a few that were submitted early, so I'd like to start with those, and then I'll follow the chat and I'll start right from the beginning once we get through these.
Are those people here though?
Well, I know, is Eric and Ingrid here yet? I think they are. Yep. So they asked, in the past I have had a soil test done by UVM. However, the recommendations for improving the soil all called for non-organic additives, except for lime. Is there a way to convert the findings to organic, natural additives that will do the same things? Thanks, Eric and Ingrid.
I mean, as far as adding additives, yes, there's some things like compost, obviously, that are always going to give you an all-around increase in pretty much NPK and a lot of other micronutrients. Organic additives. I mean, down here we use Mind. That's part of what we can do. So we're using we could use potassium sulfate or Sopo Mag, for instance, for a potassium source. For phosphorus, I mean, like even just if you look at what your, let's say like a chicken manure might have, you may be able to get enough nutrients out of the chicken for your phosphorus, especially if it's right near the plant. I mean, we use it's like a 5-4-3. North Country Organics also has like that same kind of fertilizer, a 4-3-3 or a 5-3-4. If you're looking for, mainly the phosphorus, you can go with, I wouldn't want like Chilean nitrate in it necessarily at that point, but I would want like maybe like the 4-3-3. Or you could put phosphate rock in. But I mean, as far as your main nutrients go, you can do it without a whole lot of chemical fertilizers. That's definitely possible. The smaller the scale you're on, the easier it is. So, but compost is definitely a good way to add all the nutrients. If you're trying to push your crops, and you may have to add like something like Chilean nitrate, which is another mine substance from Chile. It's not really called Chilean nitrate anymore. It's sort of.
I always thought it was called that.
Yeah, but it's like a 1501, I think is what it is on the back. But North Country Organics has a lot of different available choices, and they're out of Bradford. And Oliver Seed also carries some of that stuff.
We'll certainly add to that. The next couple of questions that we got, I didn't actually get names, so I'm just going to read them off, and I'm not sure who asked them. I am interested in succession planting, as I feel I'm not getting the most out of the garden because I don't properly. Sorry, Armin just came over here and did something. Because I don't properly plan for the planting again after things are done, like after the garlic is harvested or after peas or basil. What to put in then to maximize use of the space? Likewise, are there things I should be doing before it gets warm enough to plant beans? Also, what other things besides garlic might overwinter, like spinach, if mulched?
Okay, so I mean, there's definitely, it's marginal here where we live, unfortunately. I mean, if you just lived in Burlington, it's easier than it is if you live in Johnson. Just that little bit earlier frost kind of hurts us a bit, but as far as putting stuff in after, say, the garlic, or peas, for instance, I mean, you could still get in, a lettuce crop or another spinach crop or some kind of radish or probably. But you would be really pushing it because you could get purple top turnips for sure and watermelon radish. Those things would definitely only take about 50 or 60 days, and they can go into the fall, which they can handle the colder temperatures. If yours aren't sizing up, you think you're a little late, you can use a fabric to protect them from, freezing. As far as early season, let's see. I mean, what we try to do is, we try to overwinter stuff like spinach. Spinach is really the only thing around here that will even overwinter without even any mulch a lot of the time. I've tried growing stuff in my greenhouses. They get so cold and usually things get damaged. Most years we do get down to 20, 25 below zero here. So it definitely is tough, but parsnips will overwinter with nothing around them. Let's see. Carrots, I've seen carrots make it, but once again, carrots and parsnips, if you don't have like a protected space where the deer can't get in, I've also seen the deer come in, and once they find them, they just keep on coming back, and they'll, you know, they'll go there when you're sleeping, so you won't even know it happens, and you'll see lots of bite marks and stuff like that. But yeah, we have a pretty tough climate because we're considered like zone 3, and you know, we even, I mean, this year we're in zone 5 or 6 right now, but we can't count on that all the way through necessarily, but it's been quite a warm year.
All right. Second part of that question was also having to do with using space most efficiently. I'm thinking of putting some plants that run at the edge of the garden to run down over a bank beside my garden, like squash, cucumbers, and pumpkins. I would mow the grass ahead of them, but they will eventually, especially at the top, be growing in grass. Can I let them go in the grass, and will they still produce?
Oh yes, I mean, they'll still produce. You will have a lot of rotted fruit in the grass. And I know when I was growing things and not, so what I decided, and everyone has their own, they can make their own decisions, but when I grow my cucumbers and vining crops, if it isn't a crop that can completely shade out an area, then I'm using a fabric. I'm using black plastic for one thing, and then I'm using a fabric next to it. So, you know, those garden mats, to save your life, basically, or by using a row fabric, you know, that you could reuse every year on a small scale is probably the ideal way to go. We spend the time, which it is many, many hours just to put in 5 beds, because we use sod staples and we staple down the fabric. So for the rest of the season, I don't have to think about weeding at any time. I don't have to worry about moving my vines constantly to try to get them out of it and not breaking them off, because that's what happens when they're in the grass. You have to keep picking them up and moving them over and then mowing and then moving them back. So you got to do that every week, every other week. And then what you find is that when you're moving all those vines, you end up crushing a bunch of the fruit that you didn't even realize was there. So your yields are going to be kind of decimated a bit because you're not even going to know you have fruit. And then by the time you find it, they may be getting mildew on them too. So for a better yield, I mean, as far as home gardeners go, as long as you find enough fruit to make you happy, then growing it in the grass is absolutely fine. And you may not ever want to mow around them. It just depends on what your expectations are going to be for yield. For me, I'm trying to maximize my yield so that if my person goes out to pick the crop, he finds something, or I'm going to lose money. So I have to make sure it's easy and efficient, and that's the only way to make it easy and efficient at this time for me. If it is a vining squash, like winter squash, you can place your plants close enough together and they will shade out the whole area. If you have that area tilled and you keep it maintained until the vines start to get big, you'll find that it will completely shade it out. You could just keep hoeing around them until they take over in about second, third week of July.
Okay. This question comes from Kim. Is there any way to prep garden soil to get rid of squash borer? Do they overwinter in the soil? I have made sure to get rid of vines and debris in the fall.
That's what you want to do, is you want to destroy your vines. You want to mow around the edges of your garden. Keep everything mowed really closely at the end of the year, because you don't want to give anything a better place to survive. So if the ground can freeze, it's gonna affect them more than it is if you've got tall grass growing around the edge. Because if you've got that tall grass there, it's never gonna freeze. Of course, you also end up with like a bunch of voles and moles and stuff like that too that love to, you know, make homes in there and probably are finding your food that you left anyway. Let's see, as far as getting rid of them, I actually I read a little bit about it the other day. We've had problems with ours too. On our scale, it's really hard to control it. You can use diatomaceous earth, and we tried that. But you literally, you know, when you're on the small scale, you need to monitor it and find them yourself, and then find the hole where it goes into the plant. And the old timers say you just put a wire in there and you poke the tube out, and hopefully you kill the larvae before they start getting into the main trunk. They start in the leaves, and then they eventually go to the main stem, and that's when they kill it. So we had a lot of death out here this year from it. It was a really hot year, and we don't normally see anything like that, but we did this year. And, you know, diatomaceous earth, if you keep putting that on, if the larvae move out of the stem, it can kill them by cutting their undersides. But if it rains a lot, then you're going to have to keep putting it on all the time. But I don't think you're really going to be able to do anything organically because it's inside the plant, and you're not going to there's no such thing as a systemic pesticide in organics.
All right. Is there anybody that, before I move on to the chat, is there anything on, he's a wealth of information, isn't he? Is there anybody that has questions about any of that before we move to the next, the chat? Yep. Okay. Ingrid, yep. Go ahead, Eric and Ingrid.
Hi. Tony, I've been reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass by an indigenous woman. Really an excellent book, but she talks about, you know, the Native Americans planting the three sisters, interplanting corns, beans, and squash. And I'm kind of interested in experimenting with that. I've got a pretty good sunny plot and I've got room. I know it's probably not the most efficient way to grow all that stuff, but I'm intrigued with it. Have you ever tried that or know anything about that?
Well, I mean, it's never a bad idea to put your squash around your corn, because I know the raccoons, they would be happy to go in, but I don't think they like it. It's either the coons or the deer that don't like to go through the winter squash, but I don't think it's the deer, because the deer like to eat my winter squash.
That might make them trip, and they might not like having to go over
There's
it.
something about the spines. So, like, you know, because you're putting things together. I mean, you know, I've read stuff where and seen things where there's conventional farmers that, you know, they'll spray for weeds and they'll literally interplant. Even there's a gentleman out in South Dakota that uses peas in his potatoes, and they, you know, it's just, they're literally growing together. The vines are, you know, it's amazing that you can do that. I'm sure you could try it. You know, I mean, it would be, it's not going to hurt anything. You know, your corn's going to be a heavy feeder. You know, you may not want to put plants right on top of each other. You may still want to run rows. I'm not sure how it explains it in that book, but he's muted.
Yeah, you're still muted, Ingrid, Eric.
Yeah, it doesn't really explain it at all. And that's why I'm wondering, you know, how close do you put this stuff together? Because I get to see the vines just completely flattening the corn and stuff like that. So I really don't know. I guess I'll have to do some more research here.
Looks like Jasmine might have, do you have a question or do you have something to add, Jasmine?
I just wanted to add that, Eric, I too just read that book and read it last winter, and I was intrigued by it as well. So we just laid out our garden. So we put a bean pole that led into, like a bean pole teepee that led into our corn patch that also was neighbor to our squash. And all three did fantastic. We didn't grow them one on top of each other, but we just put them near each other just to experiment in that way. And we had a really good yield for all three. So just wanted to add that.
And I
That's
would agree
great.
with that
Thank you.
too. I've been doing a bunch of corn plants with a circle of squash plants around them, and up till this year, it happened to work out really well. This year, I think when I transplanted the squash got really happy and overtook the corn, and the corn plants ended up being very small, and the squash ended up very big. but it kept the squirrels from eating the corn, which is really a good thing. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I did do a similar thing. Like, we were having so many raccoon problems and stuff, and they just said, you know, why not just give it a try? Just put it around the edge and see if it makes a difference. Because it's so hard to find a way to get electricity and a fence and all this other stuff to, you know, deter things. So it's, you know, it's definitely worth, the more you know about your pest problem, the more you can try to, you know, discourage it from getting in there. So.
We try lots of things over here too. One year we planted lemongrass all around something for some sort of insect. So it's good to stay all of that. What is that called? Companion planting. And
Yeah.
It's all good to research. Over here, we're trying to do so much volume that we don't always get to experiment as much as we want. But
Yeah, we've tried a lot of things, and they don't always work out, but we try.
right. I don't know that I can see every single person. Is there anybody else that has their hand up that I don't see? If not, we'll go to the chat room. So the first chat question is from Diane Lehouillier, and it says, do you grow asparagus? And if so, do you have a problem with the asparagus beetles? And if you do, how do you get rid of them?
Okay.
Oh, do we ever?
Well, yeah, they're, you know, they come a couple times. And I mean, I've just been spraying with like, it's a neem oil, a refined neem oil. And I add a little bit of pyrethrum in there with it. So it's, and in fact, I've seen that type of product already mixed in, I think the Farm and Garden had it. So it's like a pyrethrum and an oil mix, so that when the pyrethrum, the little bit of pyrethrum that's in there, which is going to burn the insect, it touches it, the soap or the oil will help keep it on to the insect, and then hopefully the insect will die. And obviously, if you can catch it when the insects are smaller and they're not, you know, quite as much of a beetle, you know, the more beetle, like they come out as larvae, and as soon as you see that larvae, if you spray a couple times, you can get that first infestation right away, and then it's a while before the next one comes. My biggest problem is I can't control the weeds in my asparagus patch. But, oh, sorry, go ahead, Diane.
My plants, some of them stayed green, but some of the stalks, by the time I cut them down, they were brown. And the ferny part was brown also. Will my asparagus grow back again in the spring, or are they dead?
No, they're fine. They grew up. I mean, as long as it wasn't like complete drought, death scenario.
It was beetle death.
Oh, beetles, that's fine. They don't care. It's not going to matter. That plant had a big stalk on it. and it grew to say 4 to 5 feet tall probably, and the beetles started decimating. But it didn't matter because it strengthened its root system while it was growing. And so now that energy is in its root system, and now it's just waiting to come around again for next year.
Okay.
It's going to start sending shoots off. And you just want to make sure that, you start feeding it as soon as the spring comes. Compost or some of these kind of chicken fertilizers that are out there seem to work pretty good.
I put straight chicken manure on.
That will probably be fine. I mean, that'll definitely give it a lot of energy. Chicken manure, I can't use chicken manure. It's not a big deal for you, but because it has any pathogens and we have food safety issues now, we can't use manures.
Okay.
But we have to make compost. Of course, when I was a kid, every 2 years, my dad would back the manure spreader up, and there'd be, half a foot of cow manure on the garden. And, that would get rototilled in with this 5 or 6 foot rotavator about 8-10 inches down, so you'd never know it even was there. And the garden was beyond out of control with growth. So I totally understand why you use that. Because it does have both nitrate ions, and some plants like the ammonia ion also.
Okay. Well, great. I'm glad they aren't dead.
They're not dead. You're going to have more this year, but
Because, this is the first year that I had the asparagus beetles. I've only had them 1 year.
okay.
So-
Well, you're going to have them for the rest of the time now.
Okay.
Now that you have them, they're there. They know that your crop is there, and now they're overwintering near there. And they're not that hard to deal with. And there's probably other natural sprays you could use too, especially if you catch them early. But pyrethrum is definitely one of the things that works on almost everything.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Janet Van Fleet, I think you had a question. Just unmute first, okay?
Tremendous amount of asparagus. And one of the things I found is that to control the beetles is just making sure you cut everything down during the 6 weeks that you're harvesting. I mean, one of the impulses is with the little stalks that are coming up, you're thinking, it's not worth it, so you leave them, and boy, the beetles hit them right away. So I keep everything just completely cut down to the ground. Big ones I eat, da-da-da-da. The smaller ones I cut, even if they're really, really skinny, and I make pickles out of them. I have pickled asparagus stalks of the small ones. And boy, that really helps to keep it cut down.
Go ahead, Diane.
No asparagus comes up and lives until the season is over.
So I thought if you cut all the asparagus down to nothing, that it wasn't good for the next crop coming up. Is that true?
No, you have this window during which you can cut it. Once you have an established asparagus bed, it's 6 weeks. During that 6-week period, you cut it all down. Cut. Nothing comes up. After that, you let it come up and replenish the roots. But during that period, cut it all down. And that way, the asparagus beetles cut back on them that way.
Yeah, and that
Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, no, that's like when that infestation hit, and you did cut it all down. You've got 12 to so many. You got a few hours, whatever, before some more emerge. So the beetles don't know what to do for a certain number of hours.
And they have to lay eggs and grow. They make those nasty little black things on the stalks.
Yeah.
So if you cut them down, they can't lay eggs. They can't survive.
Yep.
So cut them down to nothing, 2 inches?
You cut them below the soil height.
Zero, nada.
And you can just snap them too. Like sometimes you can snap them off, or you just make sure that you take a serrated knife and you cut into the soil. But we do
Under
have
the soil.
Oh,
got
okay,
something to say here too.
cool.
Veronica has a question. So Veronica, if you want to unmute.
Steve.
Yeah, hi. I go out every morning and pick those little beetles off. And as far as those little shoots, I eat those as I go along. I don't pickle them. I cut them right down. And I have read that planting tomatoes within your asparagus bed helps. And I've been doing that for the last 3 years, and I haven't had beetles since.
Knock on the wood.
So
Yeah,
That's great.
that's, that's what I do.
you can try
And
that.
I got a huge bed. I get these big fatties, it's nice. I go out there, sometimes it doesn't get back to the house. I just eat it.
I know, they're nice.
They are
Yeah.
good. All right. Well, thanks for that. This is great. We're all sharing information. We might learn some stuff over here. Let's see. So the next question is from Jasmine. We get black dots on our potatoes each year, regardless of the variety. Have you dealt with this, and how do you deal with it?
Okay, the black dots. Now, are the black dots a on top of the skin problem or under the skin problem?
They're on top of the skin. It's kind of like a little pimple.
Yep, that's rhizoctonia. So what you should do next year is, soon as you get to a happy spot, like for me, when I decide I need to pick these things, I'm going to be determined to get them out and say the next 3 to 4 weeks. I'm just going to go out and I'm going to mow them all down, because if you can kill the vines completely, those black dots aren't going to come. But if you let them die back, you are going to find that you're going to have disease that'll get on that vine. You may have soft rot here and there. Blight could still hang on and wipe out things. But if you mow the vine down, and then what we found, because I read something about this, where if you mow the vines, there's still like a few things that are alive there. So what we do is we have a agricultural burner, because we're doing about 3 acres, and then we go real slow over the top, and then we cook them, because we want to make sure that vine is truly dead, so that rhizoctonia just doesn't seem to form after that. But it will form, and the longer they sit there, I swear, I used to be so frustrated when I have to bring them in and see all this little black dots that, yeah, you can scrub it off with your sponge, but try to make money. You can't make money on those potatoes because you don't have all day to scrub this. And there isn't a scrubber that takes it off except for the human one.
So how could she, if she doesn't burn her potato plants on the top, how does she just cut them off? Or
I would just take like a trimmer, like a weed whip or something like that. I mean, if you had a little brush hog, that'd be awesome. But just go down with like your trimmer with the biggest wire you can find, maybe, and just try to cut those vines as close to the hill as you can. And then, I don't know if you have this, but they sell these little torch kits, okay? They have a little long handle on them. You hook them onto your gas grill, and you just walk along. If you drive by my house and you see fire, it's probably me hanging on to that same torch. Burn, 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 because that's how I eliminate my weed pressure early on, too. We do stale bed burning because we don't like weeds, and we're going to lose money if there's weeds. So, but that same burner can now desiccate those vines fully, and then I don't think you'll see the same problems. If everything's healthy under there, you should be good.
sorry.
Thank you.
Shut it off.
That was good, Jasmine.
Yeah, that's perfect. We're just lazy and we let them die back every year. So that's exactly it. And I mean, we've been eating them just fine, but it's just annoying. It's just something that we wanted to tackle. So thank you.
Welcome. All right, the next question. So Carl Poden asks, please talk about preferred varieties and seed sources. So that is a real general question. Carl, if you're on here, can you unmute and ask us if you're looking for any particular vegetable that you're, because we generally, high mowing is one of our first go-tos for seeds, and then we go to Johnny's, and then, you know, we're always looking for organic seeds, but we 140 varieties, so there's a lot that we buy, but we're happy to talk about a particular kind.
Well, first and foremost, thank you both for being willing to do this. This is just such a gift to the community. And, you know, when Tony said 140 varieties, there isn't any variety that I don't care about. The seed sources, I'm glad to hear that it's the ones we make use of ourselves. But the knowledge that you folks have developed over time, you know, I would just love to know. You start with the more common crops. What have you chosen? Over time, what have you narrowed down to, and why is really something that, you know, we tend to grow the same things because, well, they did okay, but when you're experimenting with that many different varieties, you can really learn something that none of us on the small scale are going to learn.
Yeah, there are a lot out there. I know, like tomatoes, for example, like since I've known you, you've gone with the same tomatoes. Maybe tell them about those.
Tomatoes are tough anyway, but
yeah.
everything is dependent upon your situation too. You have to realize that, you know, if you're down here, we don't grow tomatoes outside, for instance, and we barely even grow cucumbers outside because it's not going to yield what you as the consumer are expecting. So let's say, you know, if I'm going to grow tomatoes outside, I'm going to be looking probably for determinate varieties.
And determinate means?
Determinate variety.
Determinate, yep. I have to.
That it's shorter.
Yep.
It doesn't continue to grow. It only grows so long. But they're either indeterminate or determinate. And so the best way to go is to have the determinate outside, maybe in a cage, because it'll stay smaller. And then you can prune it back maybe, or just let it go wild. I mean, you can do it however you like. The more you prune, say, your flowers, the more bigger fruit you'll get. You don't prune it all, you'll just get whatever. The more airflow any of these crops have, the more likely you won't have disease problems.
What's another favorite seed? Because his question was seed variety.
Yeah.
So what's another favorite one that we have?
Well, I mean, we could
peas, corn.
Corn
Has been a complete changeover because all of the great varieties, as I used to call them, are gone. There's none of the old varieties left. I was trying my darndest to just stick with older varieties that had good flavor and they didn't have the new gene, because I've been trying to stay away from, you know, obviously I can't grow genetically modified, but I can grow what's called the SH2 gene corn, and now that's what I'm growing. And I am growing Kickstart is my first variety. And then I go to what's called American Dream. And nowadays, because corn only comes in short day varieties, you guys as homeowners should have no problem getting one rotation out of it. For me, it makes it much harder to keep that consistent because temperatures change and I can't always put it in on at the right time or it doesn't germinate right. Where I used to be able to put 2 rounds in because I could have a 60-something day to a 90-something day. And then I just do it one more time and overlap it. And I was watching some of it freeze at the end, you know, and it was easier. Now it's a little tougher because now you have like a 70-something day and an 80. So you've only got like a week's worth. And now you got to have your next one coming. So your next slot. So they've made it a lot tougher, but now the corn tastes so much better than it used to, and a little bit better than it used to. But I've always really liked certain characteristics in certain corn. Anyway, so there's corn. I'm really slow with corn. Outside, we usually do like market more. It's kind of like a all-around type. We have a question up here.
Oh. Yeah, yes, Veronica.
You mentioned earlier that the corn is a heavy feeder, and can you tell me what I should be feeding my corn? Because a couple years I've had really good, and a couple years have really not good, and so, it seems like a couple times, it gets too starchy, and I didn't pick it early enough, and and the stuff is brown, and that seems like the right time, and I don't.
Yeah, you really, like, as far as picking goes, you really have to monitor it, and your window is totally dependent upon the variety. In most varieties, I'd say you have maybe 5 days or 6 days maybe before it's gonna start tasting woody and it'll lose its flavor. And the best thing to do is to just, if you really love sweet corn like I do, you're just gonna go out there and, first you're looking, is it big enough? Then it's, you rip the ear open, you just taste it. It's either got that flavor or
that's what I do. I eat it right there.
And then you just progress from there, and you can see after, say, day 4 or 5, you're like, oh my gosh, this stuff is enormous, and it's not quite as sweet as it was 2 days ago, right? And so that at some point, you just have to pick the whole thing, and then you and Veronica get to freeze it all.
Yeah, she's my support. Doesn't really help, though. Mental support. But what about the feeding? They feed. What do they need most for whatever they feed on?
They need a lot of phosphorus. They're a heavy phosphorus and nitrogen feeder. They need a big, strong root system. If that big, strong root system happens, then you can see that big, strong stalk.
So what's that called?
Phosphorus, honey.
No, I know, but how can he buy that?
NPK. So phosphorus is a number on your fertilizer bag. Nitrogen's the first number. NP phosphorus. So P is the phosphorus.
Yeah.
NPK. So phosphorus is your second number.
I show you that. Yeah.
Okay.
Your third number. So your phosphorus is really crucial. If we're just going to do a quick science thing here.
Yeah.
Phosphorus has got to be in the ground. You want that in your soil, and like every soil scientist is scared of phosphorus, but without phosphorus, you're not growing anything. So they can be scared as they want, but you've got to have that at the plant in the soil. Where it's,
should you till that in like at the beginning of the season, like spread it on your garden, then rototill it in, or for all the plants?
Well, it just depends, I guess. Like if your soils are really loaded up, you can just band it right next to it. And then as you're planting, you work it into the soil a little bit, and it's there in the soil. We band it because that's what natural resources says that we have to do. So we can't just go and just whirly bird it out with like the push spreader, we used to be able to do that, but now everything that we do, because that is very helpful. Like if your garden is like not performing well and you don't have any compost in a garden plot, if you had a push spreader and you had like a granular, say 433 chicken, you could put that on and that will actually stimulate that soil, and it'll have a little bit of nitrogen that's super slow release, the phosphorus, which you're going to need no matter what, and the potassium is what is going to help you in the fruiting process. So
because I used to, when I planted everything, I used to just every time I planted whatever I was planting, whether it was summer squash, zucchini, whatever it was, my corn, whatever, I would only put additives when I planted the plant within the plant whole, because my thought was that I would not be giving nutrients to my weeds. I don't know if that was right or wrong or whatever, but
it can't hurt. It's, you know, a lot of vegetables are really shallow rooted anyway, and if it's right there at the plant, then that's where it needs it anyway. And that's why, like, if you have all your plants in a line like I have in my systems down here, I just have to run the line. So I put my lines down. We make a bed, then we will drop fertilizer on the bed, and then we'll plant, and that'll work the fertilizer into the soil so that it's at the seed.
right, yeah, that's kind of how I do it.
That's good.
Great. Carl, I
Thank
hope
you.
we answered. You're welcome.
Well, so we're on corn, beans. I don't know. I still use Provider, Carl.
Yep.
Provider is like the best homeowner bean out there, if you ask me. You can pick it 3 times or maybe more, but you're really going to be struggling, or you need them bad. They're going to be real short on the 4th pick. But a lot of varieties will come in and it's 1 pick now or nothing. So, and you can miss that window pretty easy. So Provider's great. Winter squashes. I mean, anything in those high mowing catalogs are going to be as good as anything else. I think more varieties that you have for the farm stand is better for everybody. Really hard squashes to grow are the buttercup and the Hubbard. They get decimated by pests. They're doomed. You almost have to cover them. But those are definitely the 2 hardest. Carrots, the varieties are all over the place. It just depends on how long you want the tops, you want it for storage. We have changed things up a lot. Now we're growing one called Miami, which has got decent tops and pretty good size. Then there's like storage varieties like Sugar Smacks are my favorite.
Mine too.
And then beets, we grow Red Ace. It's an open pollinated. We grow turnips, rutabagas, celery root, and generally those varieties are what you find in those catalogs, the high mowing catalog, like regular purple top turnip.
Nobody really likes those.
A Joan is a good rutabaga, but Laurentian is like the variety that's it's going to be a little bit cheaper seed, and it's pretty much as good, but it doesn't have club root resistance. If you're in lettuce, you've got a lot of different varieties, and depending on what your soil type is, if you have a heavy soil, like most of us would, I would say you need an upright variety so that you can keep it from rotting. Something like Vulcan is a nice red. Green used to be a good one, was 2-star. There's a lot of new varieties now. Early season, you can grow just about any kind of lettuce, but if you think you're going to grow it after maybe mid-August, you're probably wrong. So you've got, to that point, think about diseases. So now you're into lots of downy mildew and powdery mildew. You might pick the head and think it's just fine. Put it in your fridge, and then you're like, what are all these black spots everywhere? My gosh, it's getting it, and it's just because it got some mildew. but there's definitely varieties out there that'll discourage that. What other crops were you thinking about?
Well, I you know, you've been very generous on this topic. I'm sure there's plenty of other folks with other questions. Thank you both.
Oh, no problem.
All right, next question. Brian Story asks, my beets had tiny shriveled leaves last summer. Do you know what caused this?
Actually, I'm Brian Story. I'm really Dorrigan under disguise.
Okay.
Asking that question since I'm using his account.
Gotcha. The Dorrigan wants to know.
Okay. Well, there were a couple different things that I saw in the beets since we grow about 5 acres. We did this, so your shriveled leaves, did you see holes in the beet itself? Because there's these little green larvae that hit me hard early season. That was a big problem. And my other big problem last year with shriveling leaves was due to the fact that it was so hot and so dry, and I had one field that was sand. And even though I was watering it maybe every 4 or 5 days, they were dying in parts of the field, literally dying. And I ended up with, like, I think from the stress of that, there was like this canker that formed, like a black canker on some of those. But generally you don't see a lot of problems in beets, but you know, if you do see, I don't know if it's swallowtail moss, that's what I think I always see at that time, but then it ends up being, where did these little green larvae come from? And then it's like, you better, if you have dipel, you could just spray with the dipel and those little green worms would die. Or you can go back to, oh, I don't have any dipel, but I can still use pyganic because that's gonna burn that worm too. So having different ways to do it. But shriveling leaves, that's all I'm coming up with right this second.
It was really hot last summer. I think Diane. Well, you just have to unmute, Diane.
So does that little green worm just go to the bottom, to the beet itself, or in the leaf and
No.
then down?
It goes, the one that I've seen, it puts holes in the beets usually. So when we're picking, as soon as I see the hole, we just throw it on the ground, and that's our yield reduction. It's either hole in the beet, or some kind of canker, or we'll have mouse damage. That's 95% of all damage that we're gonna see.
Have you ever seen like a little worm in the leaf that makes a little trail through the leaf itself?
Yes. Yep. That's something totally different. That is leaf miner. Now, if it's leaf miner, it could have been leaf miner too. So you better write that down. And it would have hammered your spinach at the same time, and it comes out pretty fiercely at the beginning of the year. So right off the bat, you will see that damage. From at least, we've established a very nice colony over here. So we're gonna see them again, I'm sure.
Okay. How are you going to take care of it?
It's gonna take more neem pyganic or Entrust. Entrust is the other organic chemical that's out there. It's made out of a spinosad, and it's called Entrust, and it is made out of it's a fermented bacteria is what it is. Somebody figured it out. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Would it be worth picking off the leaves that you see that occurring in right away as soon as you see leaf miner damage, so in hopes that it would stop the spread, or did they live somewhere else?
Absolutely. So, for instance, if you could go out there, and that's the best way to do it.
Okay.
I mean, if it was a spinach crop, for instance, you would just go out and pick the spinach, and then you would take all of the damaged leaves, and then you'd put them in a bag, tie the bag, throw it in the trash. Sorry, composting, not going to happen this time. So that is your other way to deal with it. But you have to get rid of the pest. It has to leave your land.
Could they put it in their burn pile? Because we're not supposed to throw that stuff away.
I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes you just can't do what you're supposed to do. That's all there is to it. But they can't stick around. You can't leave them. You can't put them in. They're not gonna die. You know, you need them. You need to eradicate them somehow. And they do. If you stay after it and spray it a few times, you usually, between that and picking the leaves, you usually will win. But they definitely come out. It's this early spring thing is where we usually see a lot of it. And spring into summer. And I've seen it go into July easily. In my Swiss chard, they'll be in that too. And that may be what the shriveling of the leaf was. But without a picture, I wouldn't know.
And you can always, I have lots of folks, especially all of our local folks like you guys are. If you have something and you don't know what it is, just text me a picture. My cell phone number is right on our website. If you text me a picture and let me know who you are, you might have to wait 24 hours or so because this guy comes in around 9 o'clock at night, but he's willing to look at things and I can always text you back, answers to your questions. I like that kind of stuff. The next question I have is, Diane just wants to know what spinach seeds you use to overwinter.
You mean the varieties that I would have already started it. And I'm not sure what variety, they keep changing so fast, but if you were to look in the catalog and just look under
High mowing.
Yeah, High Mowing or Johnny's, they're going to explain to you that this is a spring spinach and this is an overwintering and fall overwintering spinach, Diane. So you can make your choices at that point because maybe one's bigger leaves or one is, they'll have maybe some different options for you.
Do you have to cover them?
You don't even have to cover it, really. I mean, we don't cover ours, and it seems to make it every year. If we had 0 snow and 20 below 0 and they were sticking out, they're not going to be super happy, but it's amazing how they somehow survive. So I don't know. We've been lucky over the years. So, and as far as I can tell, it's really the only thing that you can put in your greenhouse if you had a greenhouse. And it still doesn't like it in there once it's down below 20 degrees anyway. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Did anybody else? Next question is from Polly MacArthur. Any ideas to get rid of tomato or the tobacco hornworms?
Best thing to do is to pick them off when you see them, and they're coming in August. That's when you're gonna find them.
You know, they're gross.
They're enormous. We if we spray, that's great, but we don't always spray in our greenhouse. It's just hard to spray in there. The fans, you got to turn all the fans off. It's got to be nighttime. So half the time when you see those worms, it just doesn't make sense to leave them. So you can almost hear them in there. So like you just like, whoa, what is, and they make such a mess so fast. So if you can just pop them off, squish them on the ground, you're winning. And there's very few of them. So yes, they're huge and they might look a little scary, but you'll be all right.
We pick them off here, off the plants. Like our crew goes in and they hand pick them off. Janet has a question. Just have to unmute, Janet.
Yes, I've unmuted. Somebody told me last year, and I haven't tried this because I hardly ever have them, but it sounds way, way cool. If you take an ultraviolet light, like you can get an ultraviolet flashlight, and you go out at night and you shine it on your tomato plants, they fluoresce. They actually fluoresce so that you can see them. And you can look at this online. I looked it up online. And when you're shining this ultraviolet light on them, and they have these lines on them, and you can see them in the way you cannot see them in the daytime. You can just pick them off and throw them in a pot of soapy water. So that's, if you have hornworms, that sounds like a really fun excursion. You could try it.
That sounds great, because they look like they would do that too.
They do it. I mean, I've seen pictures of it. It's really neat.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's probably actually easier to do that than, like, for us in the greenhouse, we're already in there and the plants are already tied up. So you can already see the full plant compared to when it's just draped over. It's easier, like, it's gotta be, because if it's in a bushy, if it's over a cage, it's gotta be much harder to find them than it is for us.
All right. Kim has a question about carrots. Do you think ProGrow is a worthwhile addition for nutrients for carrots?
And actually, I wrote carrots when you were talking about seeds, and then you did mention some different varieties of carrots. So the carrots was in a different paragraph, and it was just about ProGrow in general for a nutrient for, for a garden. Thank you.
We used ProGrow for a long time, and I mean, if I didn't buy a whole tractor trailer load of, like, just dried chicken, that, as far as springtime, ProGrow is the best, okay? Because it has a few pebbles of Chilean nitrate in there, and when the soil is not warm enough, you are going to get zero growth without nitrate. And if you don't, so when I used to grow my early lettuce, if I didn't have ProGrow, I'd have 3 weeks already at the same time, because I put one round in, doesn't grow. Put the next round in a week later, doesn't grow. Put the next one in, I'm picking the third kind before the first kind. So I'm like, oh my word, and there's no market in the world that's gonna take 3 times what you told them all in one day. So that's a real problem. So by using a little bit of that Chilean nitrate, it gets your growth going in the spring. Unless you're gonna put covers over it to keep it warm, the little tiny bit of Chilean nitrate gives you a chance, because now you have a little bit of, because you don't really have biological activity at cold temperatures, but once everything warms up, of course, it'll straighten itself out anyway. But the Chilean in there is great. I use stuff without it, but then what I do is I'll put an application down of just my 5-4-3, and then I'll do another mix in the hopper. Well, I'll add a couple cups of Chilean nitrate to the 5-4-3 and just kind of quickly mix it as a side dress. Excuse me. I'll do a side dress after the plants have started to show that they're rooting.
All right. Hopefully that helps. From Dorrigan. This year our storage plans are already.
Maybe that was the problem before too.
Oh, somebody is not muted. This year our storage onions are already rotting. Do you think this is the result of the drought or a nutrient deficiency?
Okay.
That's a good question. I mean, how are they being stored?
Better, way better. Yeah.
think that's the first key is knowing how they're stored.
I don't know where
Dorgan.
Dorgan went, so
No, she's right here. Just have to unmute Dorgan. There you go.
they're being stored the same way we always
Got it.
have.
That doesn't help.
So how are the onions being stored?
They're just,
Stored in a cool room upstairs where they're always stored. So this is just unusual for this year. These are copras, and they usually store great.
So there's
Copras.
two things that could, well, there's one thing that I'm going to guess right off the bat, but if you go and look at those onions, was there any chance that there was like one little spot on them, like one reddish spot? Because that could be the leek moth, and it definitely won't help your storage. And if you've got a big infestation, like it depends on how long you've been growing onions, because if you've only done like a few and then maybe missed a year or something, they might not have hit you. But I've been battling with the leek moth for a while. I've even had a specialist down here. I mean, it's tough. You have to use chemicals or you're not growing leeks. Once you have that pest, leeks are done.
You
You
have it.
have it?
We have it. Yeah, we have it badly. So it probably is that.
Yeah, and so I think it's the end of May is when its first flight is. And then at the end of June, it's going to get another flight. And at the end of July, if it wasn't bad enough yet, it's taking you out completely. So think about that. You got 10 the first time, then you got, I don't know, hundreds, and then thousands by the last time. So if they bored a hole in, they weaken the whole structure, and then its storability wouldn't hold on. And you might even see like the green top come up out of it because it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta save myself, you know? So where's my roots? Yep. My wife left me, but I'm ready. Kim, you had a question?
Yeah, as far as preventives, I've heard a couple things, but I'm interested to see if anyone else has been battling. We actually moved our onion and garlic crop to Bakersfield because Johnson, it was such a failure. I've heard you can actually squeeze onion juice. I don't know, I haven't ever tried this, but I'm just wondering what people have tried, and get the larva to come out of the soil, and then they find that there's no plants to chew on and they die. I have not tried it. I don't know if that works. And the other person I talked to was Jerry, who used to grow his garlic up on a hillside, and he had traps set for leek moth and hadn't been catching any in the traps. I think it was actually the extension source, and it ended up that he thought it was because it was on a hill and was getting lots of breeze or wind. And so I wondered if you had any information on that.
I mean, that's possible. I mean, maybe because if it's windy all the time there, maybe they'll have a tough time flying there. Down here where it's, you know, not very windy some days, they're doing really well. The thing you can do, they do have leek moth traps. I mean, we get them here. And that's kind of the key to figuring out when that first flight might happen. And then it's literally, you got to figure about 4 weeks. And if you're going to grow them in a place where you've grown them before, generally, this thing came, I believe it came from Canada. So it's just another one of those things from Canada, thank God. But you know, with the extension specialist, he was like, right about the time you see the flight or about a week later, you've got to spray. About a week later, I think it is, you want to spray. So you may spray twice. Like near the end of May, beginning of June, and then again twice again to see if you can catch them again or just reduce that population. And then you're gonna be picking them in August probably. So you're gonna do it on end of July again. This year, my stuff grew so fast because of that heat. I was just shocked. Like my garlic is ready. 2 weeks later, all my onions were done. I was like, what? This should not be happening like this. But anyway, so everything was like done in July. Garlic is in July. Maybe it was just a week or two in August, but it was really close. I was like, I couldn't believe how fast it grew. So,
What do you spray with?
neem and pyganic, I believe, is what we used. I would literally have to look up that pest again for you to be 100% sure, but it's a heavy rate for that one. That one is like, I mean, it's easy for the homeowner to put the heavy rate down. It hurts me really bad over here. I don't like having to do it. It costs too much. But a heavy rate for the homeowner is like you put an extra ounce in your little backpack sprayer and it's no big deal. But for me, it's like go buy another gallon.
And where can they find some of this stuff? Is it right like at the farm and garden? Or like
I mean, it should all be, you should be able to get most of it at the farm and garden, or if you can't, oh God. I mean, I don't know, like I use a chemical company for all my stuff. Like Northeast Ag, for instance, is a fertilizer chemical company. Johnny's Select Seeds, you can buy stuff right from them. They'll do seeds and this and chemicals. The people at Northeast Ag I don't think they could give you a recommendation on anything, but
you guys all probably know this already, but anything that is certified organic, you can double check it on the OMRI list, OMRI, if staying certified organic is important to you. If you're wondering, like, you can look on those lists to make sure that you're sticking with that. But most places, I know that the Farm and Garden did carry some of that. And if they didn't, and a couple people asked them, I'm sure that they would. We should move on. We have little Miss right here. Mabel. Hi, Mabel. I think Mabel has a question.
I was wondering what flowers could you eat, like nasturtiums?
Nasturtiums, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. And I'm not really a big flower person. I could go get a magazine and I could find some for you. Because if you went into, I don't know if mom and dad have Johnny's Select Seed, but I'm pretty sure it'll say if they're edible flowers. And it's really important to read. And I wish I used to know more varieties of nasturtiums, but nasturtiums, that's why we grow them in baskets, because aren't they really cool? And they're kind of peppery tasting. I really like those myself.
And Mabel, when we have our plant sale in the spring, most of the flowers, not all, but most of them are all edible. So those little pansies, and again, like I don't know the exact variety names. Heather, who has worked for us for over 20 years, she's our floral, she's all about our flowers. So she is the one that picks all those out, but almost, I want to say at least 80% of the flowers that we have at our plant sale are edible. So please come down when we do that, and we could probably tell you more, but Tony's like, Heather does the flowers.
It's true. But yeah, you can look in the catalog too, though. If you have a Johnny's catalog, probably High Mowing, they'll have flower varieties, And it makes you feel like summer too when you look at the flowers in the pictures.
Yeah. They usually have a little symbol that shows you that you can eat them too.
Yeah, or if it's good for a container plant, or if it's good to grow on the ground, whatever. But
Excellent.
Thank you.
thank you.
Let's see. Eric has a
Good
question.
onions are frozen.
Oh, is there a
Yeah.
good source for a calendar for starting seeds inside if you don't have a greenhouse? Well, that one is just, Janet was asking if the onions had frozen a bit.
They could. I don't know. Do you think yours might have frozen? I mean, it's.
Dorgan's muted.
Oh, no, they didn't freeze. And the way the onions are rotting, they're doing like a whole inside layer of the onion will be rotten.
Yeah, it's.
I
gonna
think
be
it
that leek
was
moth.
the leek moth
Yeah.
because we had terrible infestations down. We grow our root crops in Plainfield because they didn't have leek moth until last summer. So.
Mhm.
But now just think about end of the month, beginning of the next month, and the beginning. You can do it because I can do it. So if I can do it, you can. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's tough to want to do it. You know, when it's like it's tough if you're not there doing it every week, every day. And really, it's a lot of monitoring for sure. But
Just covered all of them in all the leeks and all the garlic are under cloth now, and that's work.
Yeah, that actually can work as long as it doesn't get too hot. It's and in that netting that's more breathable is probably the way to go.
That's what we got from Knowles Supply. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I've gotten through everybody on the chat. So is there anybody else that has anything to add?
There's a question about a good source for a calendar for starting seeds.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Oof. I mean, we over the years just I don't know where we would find a good calendar unless you want to make one yourself.
Yeah, we have a seeding chart.
Yeah, we set up our seeding chart, because we have years and years of attempting to do something and either successfully doing it at a time or not as successful. So, specific crops that have pest issues have to get, grown at specific times of the year, like the brassica crop, for instance, like the turnips and rutabagas would be ruined if we attempted to grow them at the beginning of the season. You just wouldn't be successful because the cabbage maggot would be just too overwhelming, unless you could cover them. And then once again, you got to go through that summer heat. And in fact, I did try it one time because I've tried just about everything, where I took a purple top crop and covered it with remag, and it stunted every bulb. So just too hot. Maybe it didn't get enough water. It was tough to manage. You couldn't really tell what's going on in there. But yeah, everything's got to be at its happy place. So.
We've used the calendar on Johnny's. If you go to the Johnny's website, they have a calendar for starting things inside, when, and all that.
Oh,
great.
And I think journaling too is helpful, because if you are writing down when you plant, it may be, but also the weather changes. So even if they say, you can't plant your snap peas until April, and then we had this really like 90-degree day or something crazy, and it ended up that I think they were in March we had planted snap peas. So it helps to kind of roll with the punches too and try things and see if they go, if you're able to sacrifice some seed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the weather around here is crazy. So if it's a dry year and you can get your peas in at the beginning of April or mid-April, then you're doing good. And sometimes, like for us, it's the big tractor, has to go out there. So I don't want to push it, like for you guys, you're like, oh, I can walk on this. This is fine. I can do it, And it's like a small rototiller probably compared to us taking the 100 horsepower tractor and trying to make it turn everything over, and then you hit a couple bad spots or start creating more compaction. So we just hold off a little bit, you know, try to find the right soil temperature is like usually going to be the biggest thing. If you're feeling comfortable that you're going to get that soil temperature for long enough. I mean, if the peas come up, you won. I mean, it's probably not going to freeze that hard in April ever again. You know, I mean, you're probably going to be okay. So yeah, you do have to roll the punches. And some things are going to be a tough learning curve, like the onion thing now. Broccoli is really tough. I mean, if you don't cover broccoli, you're absolutely, you can get their first crop, but after that, you're going to find the damage is devastating.
You don't know if anybody has heard of Swede midge, but that is something that is really tough. That's why you don't see, for any of you that come in our farm stand, we almost never have broccoli because the Swede midge has kind of killed us over here.
Yeah, and that came from Ontario, and that landed in like 1990, so it's getting worse everywhere. It just keeps going farther south, but they say it won't go to it doesn't like desert conditions, so they'll be able to produce broccoli in Colorado and, you know, California as long as it doesn't fall into the ocean. Or the fires, whatever. Hopefully it'll be okay. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
It looks like somebody's asking about growing garlic. Do you have any tips on growing garlic?
I mean, you got to plant it in the fall, and you need to plant it late in the fall. I usually plant mine within a couple days of Halloween is usually when I put mine in, because I get the land prepped. This is a good time to put down phosphorus and potassium sources because you need it in the ground. And you want it to bulb, so if the potassium and phosphorus are there, you should get a good plant. We're using black plastic to cut down our weeding again. And then we fertilize at planting around the bulb. So we're giving it that, not the pro-grow with the nitrate, but we're giving it because I'm worried that that nitrate pebble, if I put it right in my little hole, I'm going to burn it because the nitrate's a little too close. But just the chicken litter itself is fine to put right next to the plant. And some of it is on, probably eventually it's on the plant a bit, but.
What's chicken what?
Chicken litter products, all of the fertilizer that we use here.
So chicken, it's dried chicken, right? Is that
Right,
what it
it's
is?
like 5-4-3.
Yeah, the 5-4-3, if you were wondering what that
But
was.
no Chilean nitrate. And let's see, yeah. And then I'll do one more side dress in the spring. And then I pick it in July.
What does side dress mean?
Put fertilizer around the plant.
Okay, so when that's in the spring, you do it again.
So there'd be another application. And it wouldn't hurt to have a little nitrogen to make the top big if you could, but you know, just an all-around fertilizer seems to be fine for onions and garlic.
Great. Well, do you have any other questions? Because it's almost 6, and I wanted to thank Tony and Joey for this. This was just fabulous, and
Thanks,
and for your time and your expertise. It's wonderful. Any last minute questions? No. And I also like to invite people to let me know if you can think of other presentations or informational discussions you'd like to have on a monthly basis. Just get in touch with the library.
Yeah, Dorgan, thank you. This is great. I'm really looking forward to some of those others that you have scheduled. This having COVID-19 around is kind of terrible, but it's definitely brought some really cool stuff out, and I look forward to these other Zoom meetings. So thank you for organizing it, and everybody at the library, thank you for all the things that you guys are doing. You're doing a lot, and it's great.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Night to
so
everybody.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorgan.
Bye, Debbie.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Steve.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Diane.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.